one of the biggest mistakes that I think people make is to get too caught up in the numbers, to get too caught up in competing with the person next to you. And recently I had a number of tweets that I got a bunch of impressions on, and so my little graph went up, and my little brain center that looks at numbers and goes, oh, a number, went, oh, I won, I'm winning, I'm doing the right thing. But the reality is that, like, the reason that my numbers went up on those number of impressions is because I replied 27 times to an asshole arguing that, somebody said this and was completely unable to be convinced by fact or reason. And so I spent all this time arguing in what was a popular tweet from another person that I was responding to. So it became one of the top ranked responses, and I got all these impressions off the person looking at his tweet. Right? So I got 17,000, impressions on my tweets in a short period of time. But the reality is those impressions are not valuable to me. And this comes back to the same thing we talked about with subscribers, right? Like, subscribers are not an accurate indication of the size of your community. They're not an accurate indication of how successful you're being. They're not an accurate indication of necessarily anything. And so while I love that the one-shot girl raiders come in and subscribe and are interested, and there's so many of the snipers who I think are awesome to hang out, and I love seeing them, and I love when Julie doesn't stream because then they get to see me. But there's so much great community here, but the reality is that number doesn't mean a lot. And the same is true of my views, right? Like I can, in some cases, I can look and see, for example, Jose, the other day had a stream where he had 170 concurrents, but the average watch time was like, 30 seconds for all of them. And when he looked at it, he only had like 200 views because those 170 concurrents were just bouncing off of his stream. And it's not entirely clear why. For all I know, it was, view bots or for who knows what, right? Like the things happen. But the reality is that those numbers, although they seemed big, it didn't make sense to change behavior based on them because those weren't engaged parts of the audience or part of the community or anything else like that. And so, like, that's a component that you have to think about, is like, the numbers are a helpful sign, right? They're a signal. They're a little bit of a sense. They're whatever. But on their own, they don't necessarily mean anything. And so my family tracker video, which is 40 minutes long, has, like 12 views a day that it keeps getting as it's like listed on tutorial pages and other things like that. But the average watch time for that video is only 4 minutes when it's a 45-minute long video. So is that really giving people what they want? On the other hand, someone searched for how to install Samsung 853 EVO or 850 EVO and watched my entire hour-and-a-half long live stream. And so I look at these things and I try and figure out, well, what am I doing that's different? What am I getting from my communications with the community? What is bringing people back? What is doing anything else like that is really kind of driving this forward? And I think that's where I want to concentrate. And sometimes there's this idea that, like, when views go down, when something changes, there's all this notion that, you're wrapped up in views and counts and everything else like that it's a personal insult. It's a sign that you're doing something wrong. Well, no, it's not necessarily. Even if your watch time goes down, it's not necessarily an indication that you're doing something wrong. In fact, it might just be an indication that you're doing something right. You're finding a more dedicated community that you're able to connect with and engage with and other things like that. And you should not necessarily beat yourself up over what your watch time and views and other things like that look like. When you look at how to evaluate your success, it can be hard. It can be hard to not just evaluate based on the numbers. It can be hard to not think about it and think more deeply and think about what is your goal and what are you achieving. I had 27 new people subscribe to me on Twitter today. But the reality is that they subscribed to me for a set of statements that I made that I don't generally make. Usually I'm advertising my streams or talking to other people who are streaming or other things like that. And so when these people subscribe to me, they're not actually going to come back and see the content that they're looking for. And so all of these views and replies and quotes and everything else like that I'm getting on Twitter are not going to be like some kind of long-term growth strategy for a community. And insofar as that happens, looking at these numbers and getting excited by them is perhaps being distracted. My goal is to build a community of people, to build a community of a network of connections, to look at other retro streamers like Soybomb and SnapClickCat and Mikey L the Gamer and Escape Route British and Painstakingly Played to some extent, and have these people kind of build out a network of people that I can point to and refer to, and Stingray Gaming, who are point to and refer to as other streamers in the community who are retro gamers. I want to build, a space for myself as having some kind of, a little bit of sway as someone you can come to for opinions on, your content or your community. I want to learn all the things there are to learn out there, and I want to pass them back to you. Like, I want to do all of these things. And it's really hard. It's really hard not to concentrate on those numbers. It is, because those numbers are metrics, right? Metrics. We love metrics. Our brains love metrics. And the reality is that, like, building a community is a bigger task that's hard to measure, and it's nebulous, and it's all these other things. And this is one of the reasons why I think a lot of people react to YouTube's, help pages that comment on, we believe that watch time is an important metric for increasing X, Y, or Z, and say, well, that's not what it should be. It should be about community. And the reality is, community is hard to measure. It's hard to measure. It's hard to do something with that. But that's a thing that's out there. It's a thing that you need to think about. It's a thing you need to try and figure out how to get past the numbers, how to interpret the numbers, how to do something with the numbers. And I think that that's hard. So I love the community that we've built here. I love that people now are like, rant, rant, rant. I love that people like listening to the things that I have to say, that I've developed this. And it's not because I work for YouTube. I do work for YouTube. Full disclaimer, I work for YouTube. None of what I'm saying here, though, is based on working for YouTube. It's based on working in community and working in the space, community building and reaching out and everything else like that for a long time. And community is a hard thing to build, but is important to figure out how to get right. And community is a hard thing to build, and you can't build it based on the numbers, and community is a hard thing to build, and you build it based on the relationships. And so building it based on the relationships, then you've got to figure out how to make those relationships. You've got to figure out how to get people involved. You've got to figure out how to get people to measure that. So I can look at live stream alerts, for example. Live stream alerts has more than 100 concurrent users and more than 400 to 500 daily active users, more than 1,000 weekly active users. And these numbers are awesome, right? But it's not the signups that matter. The 4,200 people who've signed up compared to the 1,000 people who use it every week. I don't really care about the other 3,000. Well, I care about why they stopped using it or don't use it or anything else like that. But they don't care about, like, and I don't care about, that number as a number. Instead, I care about the people who are coming back every day. I care about figuring out how to make them come back more often, adding a dashboard or adding something else like that, and building a community, looking at building up the Discord, building up the Facebook page, building up the Twitter page, establishing myself as a source of information, whether we're talking about power generation like we were earlier tonight, whether we're talking about the sci-fi short film that I plan to be talking about later tonight, whether we're talking about any of these things. This is the key part of what I'd like to, communicate. I'd like to build that community, to get more people here, to establish these connections, to build the relationships, and to have people come back and to build the relationships with each other, right? Like I talked about, Soy Bomb, Jose Angel, Brad Pritchard, and Julie and Nico and everybody else like that who are streamers, to be able to build these connections and make these interpersonal connections so that we can all succeed together as we build a bigger community out. And at the early days of YouTube gaming, we were able to do that just based on the YouTube gaming community, right? We were one big community, but as we grow, as YouTube has grown in a live space, you've got to build these sub-communities, right? So maybe it doesn't make sense to that I've got a Discord that's just for me, and instead there should be a Retro Streamers Discord so we can all kind of support each other. Maybe it doesn't make sense that I've moved away from X, Y, or Z. Maybe it's all about making connections. I certainly know one of my viewers has said, like, the only platform that matters is the platform that I run. It's the only one that matters because anything else can go away tomorrow. And he's right. My YouTube channel could go away tomorrow for a dozen reasons. And I have to keep that in mind. It could go away as far as, what's exposed to people. It could go away as far as what discovery is. It could go away as far as any times things like that. But, like in the meantime, this is where I'm making home, right? Discord, Twitter, Facebook, the Patreon. I'm trying to give people the access and information and benefit of being here. But don't take a lost view as an indication of a personal failing of yours. You likely haven't failed. People move on. People sometimes don't, they just don't watch it, right? Like, my daughter watched, one YouTube show all the time and then she stopped. I used to watch one creator all the time and then I stopped. I've switched from watching Binding of Isaac more to watching Super Mario Brothers. All these things, they happen. People change. People move on. But at the same time, like, you have to look around and figure out, what am I doing right? What do I need to do better? What do I need to improve? And the way you want to look at that is not, how do I get more views? It's easy to fall into that trap, that views is better, more views is better, right? But what really matters to me is the comments. I got 7, 8, 9, 10 comments on my most recent video with 110 views. Those comments are worth way more to me because I'm establishing that for those 10 people, that they didn't just click in and watch 10 seconds and close out of it, that they cared. I got 3 different video responses from people. I got someone PMing me saying, you've really turned my mind around as a creator. And these are all awesome things that I've been able to do by building this community, even with the small views. And those are people who are going to come back. Those are people who are going to come back and see it again. And I think that's the thing to concentrate on, to look at the people you're making a connection with, to pull into your community, to your network, to everything else like that. That's where you want to be. I'm the Chris who plays games. This has been your CPG rant of the evening.